always.
And I did learn a lot from them, but sometimes I just want to Peter can talk to you about something.
Yes, yeah.
About.
It's just like, I said, you know, that's not your conversation. That's, it's her, that's her conversation. That's not yours. Can you set up a meeting?
All right.
I will.
Ready?
Oh, sorry.
All right. Good afternoon, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Volodrov, staff and guests. The lobbies are open and the recording has begun.
Thank you, Dustin. We'll convene the executive management team meeting for Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. Our first report today from staff is a diversity, equity, and inclusion program update from Jim Weatherly. Hello, Jim.
Hello, thank you for having me again. And Dustin, thank you in advance for helping me with those slides virtually today. I appreciate that. And for those who are maybe here on the call that I have not met, again, I'm Jim Weatherly. My preferred pronouns are he, him, his. And today I'm working from my duty station in Sequim, Washington. So I just wanted to acknowledge land-wise that I sit within Sklown land here. And I just think it's important to remind people of that in these types of settings. So very honored to be a part of that that sort of type of acknowledgement. And then I also wanted to just make sure, because this is a busy month, there's a lot of good things to celebrate, but we are also in the midst of National Hispanic Heritage Month. It's National Disability Employment Awareness Month. It's Filipino History Month. It's LGBT History Month as well. And on that last one, it's very personal and professional for me because yesterday was also coming out day. So many, many moons ago, on an October 11th in 2003, that was my coming out experience. So it is not lost on me the importance of a day like that. And I will say, even in 2003, I never thought that I would be in a work setting like I am now and being able to talk openly about it. So there are changes that come. There's more changes that we certainly need to move towards, but just wanted to acknowledge those things that we are celebrating actively here. So thank you for that. And thank you again, Dustin, for the slides. So what you'll see there is kind of a continuation. And for those that were maybe a part of the initial, before the meeting officially kicked off, we were talking a little bit about this article. And I know I mentioned it when I was with everybody in September as well. So since we had that initial, back in the spring discussion about Dr. Tima Okun's white supremacy culture updated research piece, we have had a few additional conversations around that article and discussions about it here within the LCB. It certainly started back in the spring, as you can see on the screen there, between our PAIR, which is our pro-equity anti-racism team that we have here at the LCB as a part of the bigger Office of Equity with the state of Washington, and our Diversity Council members. Because that conversation was so powerful, we then moved that conversation into our management team for discussion last month, as well as Director Garza also having us read this book by Merritt Long, our previous board member here, might be from the back of the bus, and also had a conversation about the article and the book and just feedback, updates on what we kind of learned from that. And so based on that conversation, we've kind of decided to take it a little bit further in that in future management team meetings, I may be joining in some of those instances to offer additional DEI or belonging related resources, a time for us to kind of share perhaps some mini trainings and just kind of hear from both internally and externally through that DEI lens, what we could be doing or at least informing better our work colleagues here around these types of topics. So the last piece around that article was very recently, again, last month, I was graciously invited back with enforcement and education to do a bit more training, this time at their annual retreat with the entire division. And so what we did for that was a little bit different in that, again, this article was something that we put out feelers amongst the E&E division for individuals that work within that division who may want to participate in sort of a deeper dive into that article. And we were successful with that. We had a few pre-meets leading up to this actual retreat where we kind of talked through certainly the emotions, the points that were made, and thinking about next action steps. And then what we did in that E&E annual retreat was put together a panel where these individuals that were brave and vulnerable to share those experiences, we did that in real time on display amongst the E&E division and had sort of an open hour conversation to kind of dip our toes into what this might feel like. With the end sort of ask back to the division, we sort of ended the presentation with a slide showcasing the Office of Equity's fantastic website, where there's a pretty robust resources section. And the ask, or the initial sort of where we want to go next with that, is really driving our LCB colleagues to this website, to this resources section, and whether it be around white fragility or white privilege and some of the topics that we've talked about, there are numerous educational rabbit holes in the best of ways to go here, whether it's implicit bias, microaggressions, you name it. And really the ask for us was knowing that our teams are spread every corner of the state, that those relationships are stronger at this point than any I have fostered with the agency colleagues, to kind of go where it's mattering in your communities, in your unit discussions, things that you're encountering, again, internally or externally, and then using this website as kind of a platform to look for other information that you too or they too can put together some smaller conversations. So we welcome that. We're still debriefing the annual retreat to kind of figure out what sort of additional feedback or ideas we may glean from that to do things similar to that or in addition to down the road. So we're pretty excited about where that ended and where we're continuing to push with this. And so also with that piece, we have a couple strategic planning parts that are coming up. And I would be remiss if I jumped to that bullet without backing up for a second, because I have a couple Post-its in front of me here, and I don't want to miss this acknowledgement because I loved seeing it and hearing it this morning at the board meeting with our colleagues. I wanted to specifically say also a big thank you to Officer Tiffany Archie, Sergeant Austin Shively, Examiner Brian McQuay, Officer Rob Brulot, Matt McCallum as our E&E education manager, and Letty Mendez as his direct support, and also our diversity council chair, for again being vulnerable, brave enough to step into this conversation, share their thoughts around it. I would also be remiss if I didn't say thank you to DC Ranke and DC Rupke, and certainly Director Brady for the invite back. I had a great time there, and I think this was a fantastic positive step that we can take here at the LCB. So I didn't want to forget that. So thank you to everybody that was involved with that. We really appreciate that time. And then back to this bullet here around the strategic planning that we're stepping into, both at the Diversity Council level. We're going to be pulling back in, talking about strategies related to DEI, as well as we know that we have an agency-wide strategic planning event that's coming up in early November, where we're hoping to kind of again, glean on some of those DEI-related action items that are already in place and already moving here in the agency, and sort of a sharing of ideas and kind of where we want to go to then best inform our pair team. So Dustin, if you would, please, on the next slide. So what you'll see here, and again, our pro-equity, anti-racism team here at the LCB, these are state agencies that have opted in and said, yes, we want to work on these issues. We want to talk about DEI and infuse this work into our agencies. So there on the right side of our viewer screen, these are the members of our team currently. So I'm really excited. Every agency, the state director is the lead for your pair team. And then there's this ask to have internal and external participation. So you can see internally, we're pretty well represented. I know there are some additional members that are coming from different divisions, but as you can see there, HR, IT, communications, policy, IT, again, our council and enforcement and education are duly represented with Letty there, public health, our board. Thank you again, Member Vollendroff. And then we have a couple required positions or slots that we have not filled yet. So you'll see those there in the red for those who aren't color challenged. I know that we have a tribal liaison position that is in the works and coming soon. So we're excited to meet that person and welcome them into the fold of this team, as well as we're still working on how we want to do community stakeholders, how that invite's going to look, how we want to put this together. So if there's anybody interested in that, also listening in on the call, please get a hold of me. I would love to talk further about this. And then what you see also on this slide on the left side, these are all the service line choices that the Office of Equity offered each pair team to look at. So again, for us, we started this work at the end of May, looked at our strategic plan, heard from our staff, took feedback from the public that we knew at the time, and then had the opportunity to narrow it to these 3 service lines. So next slide, please. So we have 3 service line choices here. Oh, and I saw a hand, member Garrett. I apologize. I see you there.
Sorry, I kept raising and unraising. Back to the other slide and on the community stakeholders, what is that supposed to look like? Are we supposed to bring in people from the community to be part of it? What does that look like?
Great question. And it's something that other DEI managers are asking amongst ourselves at statewide council. People are doing this differently, and it could be from a customer perspective. It could be, other organizations, agencies that we've partnered with for a variety of reasons in the past. It could be feedback about our external facing web pages. Really, the sky's the limit on this in terms of who is welcome at the table. There are many seats available. We are looking for people that are passionate about DEI related discussions and anything that would infuse or advance what we do here at the LCB in a positive way. That's the kind of energy I think that would gel well. And it doesn't have to just be the positive. It could be feedback about things that we might want to try differently or things that have been a challenge in the past for individuals.
Yeah, I was asking because of one of the comments, I think it was Peter Manny made this morning of us being more transparent and then sounds like, and then listening to him talk and others, that they want to actually be at the table inside of the LCB on some conversation. So that's the reason I asked that question, with this being an opportunity to invite folks that has a passion about the work we're doing, whether it's specific to social equity and cannabis, or I think being inside the agency and the pair, it all comes full circle to say, is that what we had in mind on reaching out to some individuals to have them part of our conversation?
Absolutely. I think that is exactly where we want to be, Member Garrett. So thank you for that question. And in addition to that, these priorities that we see on the screen, what's there on the left side, these are the key service areas that we selected. And to your point, Member Garrett, you can see across this whole slide, relationships are kind of an underlying theme here, as well as how we communicate and share information back and forth. And so for state agencies who had not yet completed what they call an equity impact review, which is that priority one there at the top of the screen, an EIR, we were afforded the opportunity currently as a state agency participating in pair work to use one of those 3 priorities to finish completing that impact review. So because, as you see there on the screen too, we don't have community stakeholders, we do not have a tribal liaison currently represented, we were cautious and didn't want to continue moving forward with developing any sort of LCB DEI related statement because we know that we're not a fully realized team yet. So we got a little bit of grace in this first priority. It still falls under this engagement and partnerships piece also. And I see your hand too, sorry. Oh, that's okay. I see you now.
I just need to take it down.
You're okay. I thought it just popped up. You're fine. So of the 3 priorities service line wise, that first one there under engagement and partnerships, yes, it's a piece that we are planning to complete ideally before the end of this calendar year, assuming that we have those individuals involved. And then the other 2 that you see represented, these are pretty concrete for us in terms of what we're working towards as a pair team. So on this workforce equity piece, it falls under this determinant of equity that we're following from King County around equity and jobs training. So prior to me coming to LCB, my understanding is that we were doing work pre-pandemic around some career pathways pieces where we would go to area schools, talk about the LCB, from a recruitment standpoint and kind of create that career pipeline in addition to educating people about the services that we do. So that would be the external piece of this workforce equity service line. The internal piece, as you can see there represented, and certainly on the external too, this sense of belonging and feeling like everybody is welcome at the LCB. Our HR director, Anita, is the lead for this particular piece within our service line options as a pair team. And we're excited about this because there is a lot of great information that we already gather, things that we are doing. We get pretty good scores in terms of demographics and how we recruit and retain staffing. And so we're looking at ways to communicate that out better with our staff that we have and kind of celebrating those things, which then leads into this third service line, which is around really for us public communications, not so much the education, even though we do that piece, but these service lines, how they're designed at the Office of Equity level. The education part of that is more specific to public schools, but we know that we have an education component in all the work that we do here. And so for this one, we've already met with our communications team, and I see Brian there in the room, and we're very appreciative of that time that we've had so far. I know there's going to be more gatherings where we're going to continue to keep talking about how we do messaging here. What sorts of DEI related things can we also offer as a pair team to already infuse the stellar work that our communications team does? And then again, listening for those pockets, like you mentioned, Member Garrett, I heard that messaging this morning as well, where we might be missing somebody, where we might be missing an opportunity to share information or just gather to get to know one another better. So there's a lot of crossover work here. We're really excited about it. And kind of in addition to this, all the state agencies participating in PAIR, we all had strategic plans that were due back to the Office of Equity by September 1st. That was, we met that deadline. Tomorrow we have our first consult with the Office of Equity in the afternoon, where we'll be hearing from Carolyn Cole, her thoughts, ideas, feedback on our current strategic plan. And then from there, we will continue meeting as a pair team. I'm going to do some one-on-ones with our directors, some management team discussions to kind of tease out whatever feedback we receive from that so we can kind of keep moving on this. Next slide, please, Dustin.
A quick point on that.
Oh,
Jim. When
sure,
you,
sorry.
When you get that feedback, could you also set up meetings with the board so we all hear that?
Yes, and thank you for that reminder on that, Chair Postman. I was going to mention that today too, that I hadn't circled back with Dustin, et cetera, to make sure that we got those scheduled. Absolutely, we will do that.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome. And then I believe this last slide is just to see if there were any questions. I was checking the time here to see where I was with what was allotted, but I would welcome any questions that people may have. Yes, Member Garrett.
I was just gonna still just follow up on the comment. I think this is really good. And I do think that it's gonna be important that we engage that external and maybe individuals. And one of the main things in going through this whole social equity process and talking to stakeholders and being engaged with stakeholders, the number one thing that keeps coming back when I'm talking to people that see what we're doing and how committed we are to social equity is trust. And it's very hard for them to, they see what we're doing, they feel good about what we're doing, but it still comes back to that trust factor and saying, because the board stands for this or the directors agree in pushing this, they want to be comfortable with the staff that's going to be doing the work and trust factors there. So I think this would be a good opportunity to get some of those folks from the community involved in our DEI work, because it's going to include them getting to know employees within the agency and hearing the conversations and things.
You're muted.
My first one today. I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying there, Member Garrett, and I see you there too, Member Vollendroff. Couldn't agree more with that. I'm excited to be working with Becky, her team, licensing on social equity, the crossover with policy, kind of lessons learned with Justin and others from World Cafe, other things that we've done, and then certainly moving that conversation, as mentioned, into our management team to kind of figure out what do we do now, what's different, what's working so far, and use that as a two-way, because I'm excited about those new relationships and being able to provide that feedback here internally, so that we can all grow from it. So couldn't agree more. Sorry, Member Vondroff.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you. Just wanted to assure Member Garrett, as the board representative to PAIR, I completely agree and appreciate your comments, and I will make sure and represent that at upcoming PAIR meetings. I think the community engagement has been, we've had a lot of conversations about your question. What is community engagement? What are we actually talking about? Because there's so many opportunities to engage the community in our work, and I really feel strongly about community participation in public policy. And this is an opportunity for that. And following this morning's meeting, it's very clear that we've got people who do want to participate in these conversations. And so I'll make sure that I represent that at our meetings and follow up on that. And then, Jim, I wanted to just acknowledge the work that you have been doing. I had the opportunity to be in Chelan and hear your presentations. You and Letty did a great job. And then Director Brady, just acknowledging your opening comments to that particular session, I thought were really good. They, you can lead in a way where you are opening up the door for people to be receptive to a message, or you cannot. And you really opened up the door for your team to be open to this message and the training. And then, Jim, the way that you and Letty set that up and had the participants the panel members be actually members of enforcement team, I thought was really, really effective.
Thank you for that feedback too. And again, kudos to Director Brady and how we did start that presentation. It was a really honest opening, and I think everybody could feel that in the room. So we do appreciate that. All right.
Great. Okay, I don't see any other questions. Thanks, Jim. Appreciate it a lot.
Thank you all. Nice to see everyone.
Have a good day. Our next report comes from legislative side, Chris Thompson. Hey, Chris.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, board members Garrett and Bollendroff, and others. It's good to be with you this afternoon. I have a few quick points to share as a legislative update, but first I'll start with, we have no news as of this date on the 3 agency request bill packages that we submitted. They're currently under review at OFM and the governor's office, and so that is their current status. We haven't had questions or inquiries from them while up to this point as they're going through their review. So I don't have any further news to share with you on that front. But a few other quick informational notes. One is that the agency's been invited to offer a work session presentation to the House Commerce and Gaming Committee. This will be on December 2nd. That meeting is 8 to about 10 a.m. on Friday, the 2nd of December. The topic there needs a little bit further refinement. The staff indicated to me that staff had not yet conferred with the committee chair about further focus of the presentation that will be asked for. What I can tell you at this point is that very broadly, the topic would be regulatory and enforcement activities related to cannabinoid products, including products containing Delta-8 THC or other cannabinoids that are synthetically derived from hemp. So that's obviously a follow-up to our request legislation from last session and the committee's interest in getting an update. I'm pretty confident that by December 2nd, we will have an answer from the governor's office on our request on a legislative proposal on that topic. So that would give us another opportunity to share some detail with the committee about that. Maybe learn more about any questions or if there are any concerns to gather more information. from the committee members. It's not a public hearing, so we won't hear from other stakeholders that get to say something in response to our presentation. It's just a work session, so it's just the invited guest speaking with the committee, not other stakeholders or members of the public. But hopefully we'll know before then, and we'll have conversations with legislators about sponsorship and about the issue and how we're approaching this and so forth before December 2nd. But certainly we will at that point have an opportunity on that topic. So we expect to pretty soon organize a planning meeting about this, but I think it's probably helpful if we get some further direction from the committee after the committee staff has met with the chair and gotten a little bit better idea what the chair is looking for.
Chris? Well, I'm optimistic too that by then we'll have a thumbs up on our legislation, which would I think help that conversation a lot. But before then, I think it'd be good if you haven't already, send the members of the House committee both some write-up on what we did today and where we are on social equity, and our settlement on the question of synthetically derived THC also, so they see that settlement in the press release and things of that sort. Those are just two things that we've always gotten a lot of questions from members from, and let's go ahead and answer them up front and let them see the paperwork if we could.
Okay, I'd be happy to write up a little something on the rules that you mentioned.
Yeah,
I have
Rick-
already
Rick-
shared with committee
Oh, sorry.
members the news about the settlement.
Okay, great.
The announcement that was made, the press release that was accompanied that. So that information has been relayed to the policy committee members, House and Senate,
Okay.
both sides.
Good. Yeah, you're usually ahead of me. Rick?
You know, I was going to share when I give my piece, but since we're talking about it, Chris, and for everybody, Representative Klob, I had a chance, who's chair of the Commerce and Gaming Committee, had a chance last week to meet with her and kind of walk through our proposed legislation, just so you're all aware. She's very, very comfortable with it. But just wanted, I was going to bring it back to us later, but since you're here, Chris, I want to make sure you're aware of that. And then we'll wait to see exactly what they want us to cover in the committee hearing. I think what I heard is they're interested in what we've been doing when you talk about enforcement wise with the the Delta 8 products are out in the private market, and just kind of an update of where we are with that. It'll be a good opportunity, I think, in the discussion last week for us to share with the committee, and we should be able to do it by then, the meat of the new THC bill that we have, Chris, and everyone. Thanks.
Yes, I did get a question from her about our proposal, and I answered her question without going a lot beyond that. So good to know that you've had that conversation, Rick, and we'll have more soon. We're going to want to bring in obviously our enforcement division in the planning meeting. We'll need to bring in folks involved with the development of our legislative proposal, obviously our communication director and others. So it's still a ways off. So I have not asked Gloria or others about scheduling a planning meeting yet, but time is coming probably pretty soon on that. Yes.
Chris, I have a quick
Go ahead,
comment
Jim.
or / question. So when I worked at King County, we had a very similar process, working with the executive's office, putting together our legislative priorities before session. So very similar to this. One additional thing that we used to do is we used to put together fact sheets or talking points on each of our legislative priorities so that all of the staff within division, although not recognizing not everybody can talk to just anybody, but people do talk to constituents and just different people. So putting together fact sheets around where we stood. And so using high concentration THC products as an example, or Delta 8, any of the thing, putting together what is our position on that? Where do we stand on certain things, so that as a board member, if I'm talking to somebody or get asked a question, obviously I can reach out and ask questions, but it might be something that we want to consider is just some fact sheets or some elevator speech, talking points, whatever you want to call it, regarding some of our legislative priorities. Just something to consider.
Yes, Board Member Vollendorf, I think that's a really good idea. As part of the package we submitted, we did put together a statement of need that addresses a lot of these kinds of issues and topics. So we have some things to work with, and once we know the governor's office says okay, and they're not looking for any revisions to it, I think it won't take long to put together a one-pager, and I think that does serve a very important purpose. So thanks for that suggestion.
Great, thank you.
So the second topic I was going to mention is that the Social Equity in Cannabis Task Force has invited our agency to submit a statement or a document, maybe in the form of a letter, but they have a December 9 deadline for submitting a final report. And they've invited our agency, and I believe also Department of Commerce, to offer some comments that they would include in their report. And the kind of underlying purpose of this would be to give legislators and the governor a chance to understand how agencies have worked with and collaborated with the task force. I asked some clarifying questions of the staff that conveyed this invitation, and then after checking with folks internally, we wanted to make sure that we had a conversation with Ollie first before we jumped into doing that, or did or said anything else about it. So maybe Board Member Garrett, we could follow up in the near future. I don't have a deadline, but the task force's next meeting is the 26th of October. So in the relatively near future, I'd like to get your thoughts on, is this a good idea? Should we do this? Do you have any further direction? And then if so, then, maybe a group of us internally, Becky Smith and perhaps others from the licensing division, maybe others would be good to collaborate with internally on putting together something that would both describe in terms of process what we've done and how we've worked with the task force over many months in supporting their efforts, as well as if we choose to offer any thoughts on what they have already decided on as recommendations. So there's a document from August, I forget the exact date, and that's their latest set of approved recommendations. So they're inviting us to address, provide any response or feedback on their recommendations to date, as well as this more general process and collaborative effort topic.
I was gonna say, yeah, I saw the email, and I saw the email where Rick referred to you to reach out to me. I didn't know this was a EMT topic, but I saw the email requesting that. So
okay,
yeah.
I didn't know. I wanted to make sure you had seen it, Board Member Garrett, and that we might follow up in setting up a meeting in the near future, and I can work with Dustin on that, and Becky and others who might be interested or appropriate to sit down and talk with you about that. Representative Deborah Entenman is the member of the House who was appointed to fill the vacancy created when Representative Morgan left the task force. So I don't know if she has been slotted into the co-chair position or what, but just passing that on. Two last quick information notes for the group here. The Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee is starting a study, a review that was directed by Senate Bill 5796 by Senator Saldana related to cannabis tax revenue and appropriations. And so the bill went through the legislature and passed, but it was substantially revised along the way. And there were some modest changes made to the statute around cannabis appropriations, but most of that was removed from the bill, and there's a key part left that directs this JLARC review, which they're coming to us for help with, and so we've just begun starting discussion about meetings to assist them with their project, which requires them to look at issues around cannabis revenue collections and expenditures, whether they're consistent with law, whether information about these topics is readily available to the general public, and whether there are ways to enhance or increase the transparency and accountability of appropriations, expenditures related to cannabis revenues. And then finally, just let folks know, I was invited to do a presentation to the Legislative Staff Academy a couple of weeks ago. They had a panel. This is an annual training event that the legislature puts on for its own staff, legislative assistants, as well as members of caucus and committee staff attend. And they had a panel that I was on with committee counsel for House Commerce and Gaming, talking about cannabis 10 years later. So I had about a 15-minute segment of that hour-long session, and shared some thoughts. I believe their intent was to record this event, and so if there is any interest, I will find out what the status of that is and how to find a recording in case anyone might be interested. So that's what I had to share with you today for a legislative update.
Great. Any further questions or comments on ledge report? No. Okay, thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
Our next update is from licensing, and Becky Smith, the licensing and regulation director.
I don't know whether to face this way or this way.
Whatever's comfortable.
Turn around, face.
Yeah.
Okay, this way. So I'm going to break this up into two different pieces, because part of it I'd like just to talk about and update everyone about what's going on in licensing for liquor and cannabis. And then I want to update you on what's going on with social equity, especially after today's meeting. I think it's important that that you hear what work we've been doing and what work continues. So I'm going to start with liquor and customer service. That I will say that we almost have both liquor and customer service fully staffed. We're not quite there yet, but certainly are working on it. We're almost back to pre-pandemic applications in customer service. So, that not that we're looking for any more work, but we're currently at about 2,648 for special occasion licenses or applications coming in, and pre-pandemic is a little over 5,000. So again, we're almost back there. We have a lot of requests coming in for virtual events. So I think that's positive that we're seeing a little of both. That we're also doing quite a bit of work in customer service with our IT. So for our IT department, they've been doing some good work with us and getting the Spirit retailer GIS map into place, and that will allow for the public to look where there's current retailers are located. So kind of exciting for our customers. For liquor, that I've spoken a few times about the number of applications coming in, and it's definitely pre-pandemic that, but they're all at once. And so what we've done to address some of the workload, because we were hitting about 60 plus file counts, and usually they're around 30. And so we have put 8 resources from other parts of my division to work files. So anybody that's worked liquor files in the past is now working liquor files again, along with 3 of our cannabis folks as well that volunteer to work those files. So, and one of the things that I think that was a positive piece is that I recently attended a conference and I heard nothing but really good things from our from folks that I interacted with, our customers, our licensees, that spoke about the high quality of work that come from the licensing staff, how they reach out and communicate, and that we've done that purposely, right? So one of the things that I've requested of staff is that they pick up the phone. It's a way to make things go quicker instead of the emails back and forth sometimes. And I will tell you that out of 91, out of 96 applications, that 91 of those were contacted within 7 days, and that's to have that to prepare and have the conversations about getting licensed. So really positive work going on there, and truly that are without the policy and education folks, the adjudications, even our S&P folks that are assigned to S&P to work that project, all of those people have been reassigned to help and carry some of those liquor files. So again, a way to really address the workload coming in, because once you hit that point as an investigator, it's hard to sort of dig yourself out. And we certainly don't want, we're division, and we need to make sure that the division's fully supported in that way. We've also have some new training coming on. So we've updated. So with all of that, we're also updating forms on the liquor side. We have a new endorsement for breweries, wineries, and distilleries. So we're providing that education to our staff, to our customer service staff, and then the applications will become available on October 15th. For policy and education, I rarely talk about responsible vendor, the responsible vendor program, but we have a new program specialist that's assigned to that work, and she's taken a real close look at how can we do things differently, how can we be more efficient. And responsible vendor program is really it's a voluntary program, so we don't often see how we can get those numbers increased. And she's doing just that we've taken and revised and redone our application. And so instead of that being 6 pages long, it's now 3 pages long. That we've also reached out directly to the compliance departments in our bigger chain stores to educate them about the program. And we had 7 large retailers report that they want to be aware of the program. They want more information about the program and how to get involved. So that's pretty positive for us to have more folks know about responsible vendor and as far as alcohol to go. Part of the policy and education unit, the other thing they do is a small business fair. And I know that you guys don't always hear about that. It happens every year. That usually it's done in person when pre-pandemic, right? So, but now we've been doing that all virtual. And that for last year, we did it. We used to have our partners with the enforcement staff, but now that it's less people actually show up for that event, that right now it's just being done by licensing. But that's was on a Saturday, and Saturday, September 24th, but we always have a booth. Ollie?
Back to your responsible vendor program. and I can talk to you more about this later, but that is that where I know there's some and I'm trying to choose my words carefully. So if they're in that program and there's a violation, there's a higher penalty there. Is that correct?
I don't believe so, but that's probably or a question for Director Brady, because I believe that they can take the class to lower their, to lower their violation.
Okay.
Because it is a voluntary program, right? So a lot of these big chain stores have their own program on, that the selling of alcohol, so like Fred Meyer's or, something like that. They usually have their own program. And so they usually don't reach out to us to do that. It's the smaller businesses that we're looking for, the mom and pop shops that maybe don't have anybody doing training for them.
But the board was told that recently, what Member Garrett just said, so we'll have to follow up and find out what the case is, because we were told that, I mean, maybe it was on the second violation. If you're in that program, there's a higher penalty than if you had not been in that program, that you get the sort of benefit on the front end, but maybe that was bad information. So we'll follow up and get that at our next litigation meeting.
So I want to move on to cannabis. That we've had, that I don't talk a lot about cannabis because it really is business as usual. But with that business as usual, that one of the things that we had discussed was reaching back out and starting to survey the folks that are having changes in their license. And so we've started that up again. That we have that overall we have contacted 22 licensees. 18 responded. They were all really positive responses. That usually we have people respond when it's not going to be positive. But we ask questions like, we ask about customer service. We ask about timelines, how were we timely, education information, and then responsiveness. We also take the opportunity to also ask about if they have any feedback about our enforcement and education division as well, since we have them on the phone. And this is on the phone, it's not online. We pick up the phone and start calling the folks that have gone through the licensing process. So it's not at the beginning, it's at the end. And then we heard that they like to turn, it says likes the turn LCB has taken to help licensees stay in compliance. Likes a new program with compliance consultants and EOs have great attitudes in the field. They feel like they see a great return on the new changes with the education enforcement. And I haven't had a chance to share that with Director Brady, but I wanted to share it here that definitely, that we are seeing, at least with the few folks that we've been in contact with, that they are feeling positive about the changes that have been made.
Great.
And then I do want to, that we have also done some recruitment outreach as far as looking at a diverse pool of applicants. And I mentioned that because that I heard Jim talk about it a little bit earlier today when they were talking about PAIR. And for licensing, we do want to make sure that our staff, represent the community. And so we have, we've reached out to, it's called The Fact, and it's actually a paper. We're going to be posting in that paper. And it's been operating since 1961. It's the first Black newspaper in the Pacific Northwest. It's a small fee, but definitely a fee that I think that will hopefully bring back good returns for us. I just think that any way that we can reach out in a different way to our community of color, we need to take advantage of that. And so that was something that we heard from the community. And again, we have 3 positions that are coming open that will be posted in that newspaper. Ollie?
I think that's great. If you do The Facts, there's another one, The Medium,
Yes.
And they are hand in hand. And if one see that you do the other and didn't do them, you will be hearing from the other one. So if you're doing the facts, you should do the medium. But also with those positions and trying to reach a diverse community, are we advertising virtual and in our are we looking outside of previous state agency government experience? Because most of the thing, number one thing I hear from the community and other people when I say, well, why aren't you applying or why didn't you apply? They would say, well, we did, but we never hear anything. And the perception is that if you're not already in state government or have previous state government experience, that ranks them lower.
So great
So-
question. And what I will share with you is that most recently we had Vipin from our HR department come in and do a presentation for us. And they are looking at different ways and different places to post positions. And he most recently helped us with one of our positions that was really heavy on state experience, to change that to allow for other types of experience as well. So great question. So I'm done with the division update. So I do want to go to social equity. Oh,
I'm
sorry.
just not used to being,
I know.
having us together. I think what I could do, Ollie, and for the team is have Vipin send with Anita an email of some of the work that we've been doing the last couple of months, to your point, Ollie. And then obviously have Anita come back to EMT to answer any questions you all might have about that effort. But I'd like to get HR to send something to the team so you can see that we're, you know, the net is much larger than it ever has been. But we can do that through an email, and then again, next time we meet, Ollie. Thanks.
All right.
So I want to move on to social equity updates. Because there's been quite a bit of work going on, and that I wanted to address the third party contract that we, probably over a month ago, we put out a request proposal for a third party contract for a vendor to review our social equity applications. That it is required anytime that you're putting out a contract that would be more than $30,000, it's required that we put it out for bid. We did that. We received 3 vendors that proposals that we reviewed them, and we did choose a vendor. That third-party contractor that we went with, we signed the contract last week. That the selected vendor is Quinos. I know I'm just brutalizing their name. Perito, Wood, and Boyer, and it's a law firm. It's called QPWB. They identify as the largest minority and women-owned law firm in the country. They have experience working with local, state, and federal agencies to develop comprehensive programs to engage minority-owned contractors. In addition, the firm has a cannabis law group that provides guidance on the cannabis law in Illinois. We met with them last week. It was a really positive meeting. That they provided us with just a little background about who they are, what they're going to bring to the table, that they're that they're going to, at the end of this month, they will be providing us with a roadmap with the documents and a workshop information. And they're also reached out to also offer us some to addition to what they're doing for us, they have the ability to help us with communication. And so we're going to be setting up a meeting with our communication division as well, just to talk about outreach, because they have, they're pretty passionate about not just using the same old tools that we've always used in the same way, but actually being purposeful about posting things in different papers, about doing events in different parts of the communities, whether that's virtual, but getting the information out and not just using the state, regular state or regulatory ways to communicate. So we're going to take advantage of it, certainly because we have the opportunity. Ollie?
I am so sorry. Most of the time I am really quiet. Becky, I think, and when I read about who was selected, I thought it was great. I think that from what I was hearing this morning, and I don't know if we did or not, that it would have been great if we had put out what you're saying now to the community, who was selected, that they were the largest minority, that it was only 4 or 3 that responded. If we had put that out, being proactive, not reactive, that probably would make a big difference. Just something FYI going forward as we're going through this process, for us to try to get those types of conversations out at the time that we signed the contract, maybe, or something. Just FYI thought.
Absolutely. And I think that communications, and Brian could probably cover this when he speaks, but I think that that's what they're working on doing as well, is that getting that information out to a bigger group of folks. The other piece is I did want to talk a bit about the DIAs for social equity, so the disproportionately impacted areas, that we are making progress. I know it feels like we're in the sand here. It certainly does for me sometimes, but we hope to have all of King County Superior Court data in King County District Court by the end of this month. That we have had some difficulty in getting the 1980 data, because it is 1980 data for convictions. But certainly we've been, that I will say that Jeannie and Caitlin and Dr. Williams from the University of Washington, that even our IT department, we're also working with Esri to discuss without us about geomapping. That we met with them twice last week. We met with them this week with IT. And so there's a lot of resources that are not just licensing, but also IT resources going into the development of the DIAs. It certainly is a little bit certainly out of our expertise, but we're learning a lot in a very short time frame, and certainly have had a lot of help from this board as well, and guiding us and helping us get material that we needed or data we needed in a quicker fashion. So again, we're hopeful that we'll have something to show for this soon. And that we're shooting for November, but that might be a little too aggressive, but certainly we're hoping to have some type of look at these maps, and the maps will be interactive. Just so you're aware, is that an applicant should be able to put in their address, and if they lived there in 1980, go to the 1980 map, and they'll be able to see whether or not that area was a DIA, or in 2000 to see if that was a DIA, or 2010. And so that ultimately these maps should be very, that helpful for those licensees or those applicants that will be applying. Any questions?
Just what, I think you mentioned it, or someone from your staff mentioned this the other day to me, but the 1980 date, that's not optional for us at this point, right?
It isn't. We could go either way, that they lump it up in decades. But once we ask for the information, we can't get partial. We can't get the arrest rates from 1990 and then get something else from 1980. We have to go back and then do another different data pool. So anytime we make a shift, we have to go back and get different data. And so that's what's been time consuming, is to try to figure out what we have available. The full package. And then that if we don't know what we don't know, so when we see the data, if we have to go back and ask for something different, I think that's where it's posed to be challenging for myself and my staff, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
They should give me a degree in data after this. So for licensing for Department of Commerce, this is really exciting that we continue to meet with Department of Commerce. That Sarah Davis that's full-time on social equity. She meets with them every week. We meet with them every couple of weeks just to get updated. But they will be publishing their RFP for the mentoring program on October 14th, and they're going to be publishing it to our website. So they don't have their own platform. And so they'll be using our platform to put that out. So that's really exciting. They're also for technical assistance. So all their modules and courses will go live on October 14th as well. And that will also sit on the LCB website. And if you remember, these are the same folks that licensing is going to be using. So it's the Make Go Green. And if you remember, I keep calling it Go Green, but Make Go Green is the cannabis. So if you look them up like that, you'll be able to see what kind of work that they've done in other states. But certainly we've been working with them on our training and meeting with them on, the training that's going to be available for the application. Once we receive the information from our third-party vendor, that will also be where that sits. We'll be doing videos and we'll be having just the walkthrough information, the modules that folks will be able to use as well, and have the process of what a social equity plan looks like and how to, that what information they need to be, that needs to be in that plan. That will also be something that is provided by Department of Commerce. And one last thing. So one last thing is business licensing services is that we've been, that some of this is silent to folks that they don't see it, but I think it's important for you to know that that we have had some struggles. We've come through in a good place with business licensing services. So we've worked through the challenge that includes finding a solution so we don't have local fees when a social equity applicant applies, because they won't know where they're going to be putting their business at, and where they would be applying is probably their home address. And we didn't want them to have added on fees. For instance, the city of Olympia has one type of fee, and maybe the city of Seattle has another type of fee, and that might not be where their business is located. So they're not going to be charging those fees when the application window does open. So that's positive, and IT has been fantastic in helping us with that as well. Sorry, I know it took a lot of time. Any
That's all right.
questions?
Any other questions, Becky? No. Okay, thanks, Becky. We'll move to the next available Smith. Brian, for a communications update.
Thank you, Chair Postman and members Garrett and Vollendroff. Good to see you again. The first on my list, I think, was some of the stuff that we're doing with commerce that Becky touched on there. So I won't, but I'll let you know that I'll address your question in a minute, or your point, Ollie, that you made about going public with the stuff regarding the third-party vendor, et cetera. But just kind of going in the list that I have as far as media has remained consistent as it always does with our office, where we get a couple a day that come in, but there's no theme that's going on at the moment. It's just localized information and stuff that any particular reporter would be going through. Ollie, maybe you have more, but there was a lot of follow-up from PJ, the reporter from King 5, who interviewed you for the Facing Race series. I haven't seen anything on it, but she had a lot of follow-up after that interview. So
did you let her know what we did today? Does she know we've continued to make progress since she started this story? And
well, I haven't talked to her, this week about it, but I can follow up for sure so that she knows where we're at. That's a good point. But on the social equity things with regards to what's going on with commerce, Becky is right. That licensing has been very embedded or strong partnership with that agency going through there. We're there and represent communications on those weekly conversations about how we can leverage their stuff. And as she said, we'll be posting the Make Go Green information and access to those seminars or those videos, et cetera, through our own website. We're also going to be running it out through the agency newsletter, which will be going out on Cannabis in about 10 days to a very broad audience, et cetera. Also on the social equity stuff, I'm glad that Becky brought that up with regards to reaching out to the facts and the medium. As part of our communications plan for the rollout of the social equity licenses. We've identified a number of news publications that you could say reach a diverse audience. And we plan to actually run ads in those publications as well, so that people are aware and see that and make it in clear language, and they can have a consistent run throughout. So that's planned. Tying in, I guess, to that newsletter is that first cannabis, and then following that will be the alcohol one. And just so you guys understand how that works is that, say, for example, on cannabis, we have about 25,000 people who have self-selected, self-subscribed to our cannabis update lists, in addition to a number of other lists that we have on, say, the cannabis side. And if we have about 40,000 people or 35,000 people that we might send out that cannabis list to, you're going to get maybe 20% that's going to open and spend some time to go through and read it. You're still hitting about 7,000 people at least that are taking the time to actually read what you have in front of them. We try and make it readable and easy with graphics, et cetera. And we're hoping to be able to reach a good audience. We'll be able to do that with the piece that you mentioned, Ollie, about the third-party vendor. I mean, your point was well made, is that we could have done it right when it first happened. What we did do with it was we posted it to our website, which is where we tell everybody to go for the latest information about social equity stuff. We put that right there, but your point was made. I think I made a determination that it wasn't a broad news thing that people were going to care about in a direct message to, but in retrospect, maybe it would have. So anyway, it's out there on the website, and we will include it in the newsletter that's coming up here in about 10 days.
Do we, or could we have a social people interested in social equity program list that people could select and say, anything that happens, send me the notice that that's on the website?
We can actually do that. Yeah, we'll have to create that. It doesn't exist now, but maybe that's a good topic for the newsletter, is to let people know that they do it, and we can create that in advance. That's a good idea.
You know, there's a smaller group, though, a big group, and we don't know who all, but at least then if they want to, then, yeah.
I went to the website after the comment was made, and I think I saw it there, that you can actually get on the
Yeah.
distribution list so that you can get updates just on social equity.
Well, if we did that,
I saw it there.
it's on a social equity page. It goes through updates. They can get that through there, Rick. So if I misspoke,
Well,
but I don't think so. I don't
let's
think
just find a way to,
Yeah. but that's a good point. We can look at that. Something coming up that looking forward to is that in November of this year is the 10th year anniversary of the passage of I-502. I'm one of a couple, 3 people that in the room here that was around when that actually happened here at the LCB, and know where the agency was following the passage of 1183, where we had to lay off 1,000 people when we privatized the state liquor system. And it was in about a year from there that we took on I-502. And so much change, obviously, within the agency and elsewhere, that we're going to take a look back, I think. And there's some things planned, and Chair Postman and Director Garza have been very involved with this, as long as with other members of the staff and myself, to plan for this. And on November 1st, the board's going to have a conversation at caucus with the initiative writer, Allison Holcomb, a very forward thinker and someone that I think could be a very engaging conversation. More to come on that. And on the 8th of November, you've heard me speak before about the study that the University of Waterloo had done with regards to cannabis. And there's going to be a conversation with that professor, as well as communication to the public in advance and following some of the findings from that study. And there's some things in that study that we learned really for the first time that are coming through that I get asked about by the media, and I know the board gets asked about, et cetera.
Usage and
usage, where people get it, the kind of stuff that they're using. Are there any trends, that type of stuff? And so that'll make for an interesting conversation. So that's on the 8th of November. And there's other conversations about other panels that potentially could be coming, but those are still kind of in the works right now. So that's going to be interesting. You should plan on media interest, certainly around Allison Holcomb, but as the 10-year anniversary approaches, It won't happen on the 8th. It'll happen later in October, I think, is when you're going to start getting these things. I'll probably start getting calls about it now. So I am lining up various people that could talk to various aspects of the report or this and that. So it's not just coming from me when these things come through. And so heads up that there's lots of questions about all of our work and then that may be of interest where you may be having a role coming up. And then something else that we're going to be doing is on the intranet, which is our agency SharePoint site. We also have some things planned around the 10-year anniversary and getting employee perspectives and things that are coming out in an upcoming issue. But it's also, we're coming up on Veterans Day. And a lot of times we're working so fast around here that in the last couple of years, I don't think we've given the due from communications to our agency veterans and all the work that they do. And so with the help of HR, we got the names of all the people that have served in the armed forces, and we'll be featuring them on the intranet. I have an idea about involvement of the board with this that I'll be following up with you guys on because I know that it'll be something that could be important to you and to all of us.
Cool.
So that's the main type of thing other than the stuff that we do on a regular basis, but I wanted to alert you to.
Great. Any questions for Brian?
Real quick, I'm trying to find what you were saying on the website and the announcement. Where is it and what is it under?
Go to the,
Just send her a link maybe after.
Yeah.
I'll send you a link after that. It's on the social equity page.
And I'm on the social equity page.
On the internet site,
Yeah,
not the intro.
I'll follow up with you right after this.
All right, thanks.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Enforcement and Education Director Chandra Brady.
Good afternoon. It's great
Hello.
to see all of you. Thanks for having me. I have the pleasure today of running you through our monthly data for enforcement and education, and advance thanks to Dustin for managing my slides for me. Thank you. We just start by looking at an overview on slide 2 of the number of licenses that we are tracking. Just noting that in 2021, we had 1,821 cannabis licenses, and in 2020, we had 1,844. So that number is lower than it used to be. Otherwise, things are increasing. Slide 3. I just wanted to share that, as you can see, last month, 75% of our cannabis complaints were internally generated, looking at records keeping violations. And so that was a lot of our work with CCRS and making sure we were getting everyone properly up and running. And last month, 76% of our tobacco and vapor complaints were internally generated. In the month of September, though, this fell to 6%. Some of the ways that we were processing information is when we were addressing certain types of investigations, we were looking at them as internally generated complaints. So we have changed the way we are reflecting those so that they're not identified as complaints. And that's just our expired license processes so that we're not inflating those complaint numbers for that unit. So as you can see, that number went down substantially in the dark blue for September on the right side for tobacco and vapor. Next, we'll just talk about the percentage of our complaints that came in that were related to public safety. You can see that in liquor, that's as high as 40%. And then overall, for all industries, it's 36%. We should see that number increase a bit as we've taken out that expired licenses component of tobacco complaints, because that clearly wasn't a public safety complaint. So we won't be tracking that as a complaint, just more of an administrative process for the division. Looking at the next slide, we look at education compared to violations. And so, as you know, last month we added the gray field on the right that shows what we're forecasted to do for education. And you can see that we're going to be almost exactly the same as we were for 2021, which is saying quite a lot for the amount of education we did, considering 2021 was a huge year for education as it relates to COVID, and then also considering our staffing vacancies. And you'll see some data reflected through the slides today where you will really be able to see the impact of some of those issues we had in the industry and our staff addressing them. For example, you'll see lots of education in cannabis because of our retail robberies and similar things that we'll talk more about as we get there. If you look over on the violation data, you can see in 2022, the NTCs are still increasing in their use, and AVNs are going to end the year higher than last year, and that's because of the restart of our youth compliance program. Licensee education, second quarter to third quarter is almost, it's within 150, 200 of the number of contacts. You can see that they're staying really consistent even with the variable in staffing. When we start looking at that education contact breakdown, oh, I forgot to start my timer. I'm going to do that really quick. Sorry. When you start looking at the education contact breakdown for each of the different industries, again, you can see that cannabis is really, their numbers are impacted by different things that are happening in the industry and our response to the industry needing that support during that time. We had lots of education about traceability and the change over to CCRS. We had lots of canopy education and then the education that happened during the incidents of retail robberies. The numbers are also, as you can see in the blue, impacted on the liquor side by COVID. And then also you can see that decrease that we're experiencing this year that's really impacted by staffing too. If we look at licensee education, note on this one, overall, and this is just a look at the month comparison as opposed to the year-to-date comparison. You can see that the month of September, which you're going to see throughout these slides, because if you remember, we were all at our annual in-service training for a week. So this has a week less of data than we're typically seeing in our monthly review. You'll see some decreased numbers here, and that's what is impacting these numbers you're seeing for September. When we look at the top 5 topics for education, this looks very similar, same order as last month, not a lot of changes. And when you break it down into each industry, that reflects the same really consistent data where a lot of our work is regulatory, then youth access and public safety come in as numbers 2 and 3. And that's really where we should be considering our mission. When we break down what our violations were for year to date 2022. Again, on the right side, we continue to see.
I think we're off. I think we're off one slide from what you're talking about, Chandra.
Okay.
There we go.
Oh, that's what I just talked about. One more, Dustin. It must be that injured shoulder impacting his driving.
Oh, God. That was cold.
Anyway, on the right side, you'll see, I'm going to get it for that one. You'll see again that the NTCs, that notice to corrects, are utilized very well in the cannabis unit. And that warnings and AVNs are used when those tools are not effective. And then over in liquor and tobacco and vapor, specifically, tobacco and vapor have a higher number of warnings to AVNs, and that's reversed in liquor. And that when you pull out the data and look at that, that's as a result of the youth access work they're doing in compliance checks. I'm pulling over my slides to make sure Dustin and I are on the same screen now. I learned that lesson. When we look at the topics for that notice to correct tool, that remains very consistent month to month. We are seeing some more stuff now that we're looking closely at folks' and their compliance with CCRS and our record keeping requirements, we are seeing a bit more on those issues. And we will probably start to see some enforcement work as in the coming months as that issue continues to progress and we continue to get folks in compliance. And then when we start looking at our AVNs, you're going to see something very similar to what you always see, lots of work as it relates to public safety, specifically to protecting the youth in our communities. And then a couple down there below, well, one about not disclosing financing when it comes to a more detailed investigation. And we rarely see those. And what you'll see there is probably something that involved other violations as well. And there'd been a lot of work done in education as well. Next slide for warning topics. This is a tool largely used, as you see here by the topics in the tobacco and vapor industry and also in cannabis. So you'll see a lot of the master service agreement violations or warnings there for this category. And again, we've kept solid since May of 2022 in the cannabis industry. We've had 0 cases forwarded to formal hearings since May, which just goes to show how much work this unit is doing to resolve issues at the lowest level possible. And then, of course, also in liquor, we've had 1 go straight to formal and 1 forward to formal. Well, last month, 0 this month. So that is a trend. That just shows us how much work they're doing to resolve issues as they arrive. And again, use that as a tool to help people get in compliance. Now we get to talk about compliance checks, everybody's favorite topic. We've been doing things a little differently. We've been randomly selecting and assigning our locations for compliance checks as opposed to selecting them as part of our workday. As officers selecting them, we've been selecting them just to make sure that we're being attentive to the equity issues as well. And so what we expected to see was potentially a small drop in the compliance rate. And that's it's kind of what we're seeing. We don't have enough long-term data to see whether that's in fact the case. But it looks like over the last 2 months, that is what's happening, but we'll watch that for the next couple of months before we make that determination. But 168 checks with a 77% compliance rate in liquor. And then here is the ever popular slide that tells us the delivery and curbside rate. And I wrote down the difference between delivery and curbside. Delivery had a 40% compliance rate. And as you can see, it was pretty consistent with last month, although a fewer number of checks. So just remember that the lower the number, the harder it is to really rely on the data. But 58% is where that's setting. And then when we look at compliance, again, a very low number of checks. The compliance rate was 84% out of 13 checks this month. When we look at tobacco and vapor, we have a 70% compliance rate with 27 checks. Then we'll move on to premise checks. And as you can see in this category, our officers are still getting out there. Again, a reminder that we were out for a week for in-service training, but you can see that they still managed to get out there and get in face-to-face contact with our licensees, see if they have any questions, and see how things are going for them out there in the world. This is the number of checks that we're doing when we're out and about. One of the things we realized is there were proactive things we could do in addition to compliance checks just to bring attention to this issue. So when we're out and about and we encounter youthful looking persons, we're measuring the number of times that we're checking IDs. And then this is our CRY unit. So they run criminal history records, lots of support for licensing and hiring here out of this unit. The next few months are busy months here. You can see that tobacco, or I'm sorry, tobacco, I was reading that. You can see that September wasn't a incredibly busy month for them, although it was pretty consistent for cannabis. It was a little bit lower for liquor and tobacco. And then I just want to bring attention to the time. This meeting is only scheduled till 3 o'clock. So I'm comfortable just sending these slides in if you'd like me to end here shortly. I did want to skip to the end though and cover some stuff that happened at in-service training if we still want to try to end this at 3.
Well, we won't end it at 3, but yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and do that and just try to recover some time. Here's a photo that was taken at in-service. I just wanted to share this with you so you can see the faces of this great team that is out in the community, out across the state, doing this work every day. And the next slide has some highlights of in-service training. I really wanted to thank Board Member Vollendroff, Board Chair Postman, and Director Garza for coming. We did some different things. We had a panel with Board Chair Postman, myself, and Director Garza where we answered questions. We kind of had a playful, direct panel where we asked each other questions. What do you see coming in the future? How much longer are you going to work here? Staff, I got a lot of great feedback about it. Staff really enjoyed it. And then Board Member Vollendroff was able to greet staff formally. And then I think everybody that was there got to have a little social time with staff and answer questions. So it was a great opportunity to have some FaceTime. I know that Board Member Garrett wanted to be there also, but had a conflict. So we're going to work on getting her to maybe our leadership in service when we have it in the spring or the next in service. So I'm aware that she's committed and wants to be part of that. We talked about the challenges and changes that we're facing in law enforcement. We talked about officer wellness, communication. We spent a day with a great communication trainer who always does a great job for us. We talked about tribal protocols, even though it says protocells. Maybe we talked about that too. I don't know. AG law, the AAG came and gave us a law update, and we reviewed how to do search warrants. We had a great conversation, as you already heard about DEI. We celebrated a retirement and did 3 promotions. We talked about our strategic plan and how we are using it every day. We had a wonderful awards banquet, and we had a couple of great social networking events. And then we also raised $1,300 for Behind the Badge to benefit the families of fallen officers. So it was a great week where we completed our mandatory annual training and made sure that our officers have access to updated and professional standardized training. So with that, I will close, send you the rest of the data and on slideshows and answer questions. Yes, Ollie?
Going back to slide 11.
Yes,
and
ma'am.
real quickly, we can elaborate longer if necessary,
No
a
worries.
separate call. But
Mhm.
when we look at the notice to correct, and do we and is enforcement seeing any type of consistency on something that as an agency we can be proactive with in helping them? Not just going in individual of putting something out. And where I'm going with this is we're hearing more and more from people, whether it's liquor or cannabis, where having new employees, having a hard time getting employees, on, that there's a breakdown in the level of people they're having to hire in order to work in their locations. Is there anything proactive we can do? I remember a couple of years ago, licensing, we talked about bud tender training, but to go back to the basics of saying if our licensees are having to now bring in majority new employees, were there any type of training, workshops, or materials that we sent out years ago that would be good to now reinforce to send out to them to share with their employees?
I think licensing does a great job of renewing and making sure the info we send out to new licensees is current and addresses current situations. I know we just recently looked at one of the forms. And communications does a great job of helping us keep up with current issues. For instance, CCRS, right? And so when that kind of stuff happens, we're communicating about those issues. As far as back to basics, there's nothing that's standing out for me, but I can certainly ask staff at our next all staff meeting. And if that's the case, we can do that work too.
So for
That's a great
instance-
idea.
For instance, on failure to maintain required insurance, is there something we can send out to all licensees as a reminder to check expiration on your insurance? Because they might have new people there in those roles. Just simple things. If we see consistency
Yeah.
of the
So
same.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. That's one of the great aspects of our education program. If I were seeing a number higher than 9 here out of all of our licensees, then I would say absolutely we should do that. What I think is happening here is because we've been talking a lot about retail robberies, because we've been out there talking a lot about CCRS and looking at record keeping, then we're finding some of these other things and just giving people notice that they need to correct it. And I would say, you know, out of 1,800 folks, 9 is probably not a bad number. Does that make sense? If this were 900 or 90, then yeah, maybe we should send out an all points bulletin to make sure people were doing that. But it's a good idea to keep an eye on that.
Okay. I think that's it. Thank you.
Jim has his hand up.
Oh, I can't see. Who has their hand up?
Jim.
Oh, sorry, Jim, go ahead. Can't hear you though. You're muted.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now.
You are.
And probably now is not the time, but going back to compliance and compliance rates, I'm really curious about our benchmark and what we're actually hoping to accomplish versus what we actually see. And then I'm also curious about, I'm not a data math guy, but what is if we find compliance at, 70% or whatever, for example, what's our estimation of how many sales are actually happening to a minor that we don't find or don't catch? And to me, that seems like it's a likely fairly high number. And I wonder, like for me personally, I think sales to a minor are 100% preventable. I think they really are, given the right set of circumstances. And have we ever, had a conversation about, what would 100%, sales to minors look like, or, no sales to minors look like? And what is our benchmark when we look at these numbers? I wonder, at what point am I supposed to say, wait a minute, I'm alarmed? Because I'm kind of alarmed when I see these numbers.
Yeah,
and I don't know if I'm
absolutely.
just overreacting or if it's like, no, you should be alarmed, Jim. So.
It's alarming when you think of it. And so I'm going to answer it as briefly as I can, but we can follow up about this because there's a study and it's a standards and that's why we do it this way. So I can send you info. But first thing I want to say is when it comes to what we want to see as an outcome for youth access, we want to see 100% success. We want to see our benchmark. What we want to see from the industry when we're measuring this is 0 sales to minors. Our goal is public safety. Therefore, our goal is 0 sales to minors. When it comes to what we're measuring for our staff performance, it is how many checks are conducted. I always want to remind our staff that our work is doing the checks. it's the industry's work to prevent youth access. That's their responsibility. And so I want to be careful that when our staff goes out and does all this great, thorough, well-planned work, that when we get a 60% rate, they're not feeling like that's a failure on their part, because they've still done 128 checks. And so
Right.
that's the important part.
Well, and
Is
while I
there-
agree with that 100%, I do think we have a role to play on the policy side of things. So I definitely 100% agree with what you said. This is not a reflection on the officers or the work that we do, but on the policy side of things, I feel like there are opportunities that perhaps we could help address some of those concerns potentially.
Yeah, and we do a follow-up education, and we are working with folks that are currently struggling with some of the delivery components of this. And we do work with our policy and rules team with some of these data. So there is a lot of work we can do. But yes, we also, you asked about our benchmarks. You'll see, if you look at some of the stats, you'll see that we have high numbers some months. And so you can kind of tell what our benchmarks are, because some units will say each officer has to do 7 of these each quarter. Some units are by June. And so you can see that, oh, in June, there was this many checks. Well,
I see, yeah.
so I will get with you and spend some time talking more about these checks and
Okay.
why we do them the way we do and what the expectation is. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think, and following up, Jim, to what you're saying and the selling to minors and how that should be 100%, that's really getting back to what I'm saying about staffing and what businesses are having challenges with. And it's not that they are not training or committed. I think, and I see it in stores, in the Safeway and the QFCs and stuff that I frequent on a regular basis. I see the difference, and I know the managers at those stores, and I know that they are committed and has done the training. There is a break, or I don't know what the word, in getting people in to fill positions, but the staff, and whether it's our industry, whether it's the restaurant industry or whatever, customer service has dropped. Folks that are being hired don't care. They are not the same type of employees that are there to protect and work with who they are working for. And that's what I'm alluding to when I say, is there anything we can do? But I don't know what that could be, but I just know that all businesses are struggling with getting employees that care about the business and doing the job correctly. Because what I see at those self-checks in the grocery stores and on, and all of these new kids and people they are having to hire just to have somebody to fill the shift, it's a struggle.
Yeah.
Well, we can look at this maybe next month, Director Brady, you can bring us some numbers, pre-pandemic alcohol compliance numbers, and see what that looked like compared to 21 and 22 maybe. And see if the, the great resignation and quiet quitting and all the rest is impacting that. And I think we're all 3 board members agreeing on the concern about this. And I think Member Vollenberg, we do have some policy levers we can use. And it's not at all a reflection on enforcement. It's if we see a lot of first time offenses, that's one thing. We're seeing more seconds. We're seeing some thirds. We're seeing with it doesn't matter the size of the business, from massive corporations to mom and pop operations, and it's going on all over the place. And so, we have levers. We can increase penalties. We can decrease mitigating facts if that's what we want to do. Because I agree, it is one of the prime measures of protecting the public safety and health. Rick?
Yeah, thanks, David. I think an interesting thing is the recidivism rate has always been very low for alcohol, that they're not going to typically offend again within that 2 or 3 year period. So it would be good, Chandra, to kind of look at that and see, has that changed
I think it is.
You know what I mean? So
I think anecdotally.
that's what
we
we're
would probably
seeing.
from what you're looking at.
Say there's a fair number of second offenses that we see.
And then I hear what Ollie talks about with respect to the businesses. I know of 2 businesses in Olympia, and this is anecdotal, but they're basically just not accepting vertical ID because they know that when we do our checks, we use vertical ID on those minors that go in there.
That's actually
And so
great practice.
So in order to
Yeah.
just never, if you want 100% rate,
Yeah,
you ask Jim,
Yeah.
don't accept vertical
Right.
ID. And so it's kind of,
That-
balancing the whole thing, right? The businesses that are impact, and then how do we get the compliance rate higher? But it's an interesting
talked
thing that they
about
can
this
do.
here. You know, we see instances where the clerk looks at the license and then still sells.
Right.
So they're looking, but they're just not making that connection. And then to what Ollie's saying, maybe because they don't care, maybe they're brand new, maybe they get intimidated, they don't know what's going on, they don't remember what they're supposed to do. But there are answers for all of that. And that's one of them. That's an interesting one. Vertical,
Yeah.
no, or scanners for every single one or something. But, okay.
Yeah,
Good
I
time.
can focus in on the youth compliance issue for the next presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We are behind, but
Thank you.
let's keep chugging. Policy update with Justin Norhorn. Thanks for your patience, Justin.
Oh, no worries. Thanks, Chair Postman, members Garrett and Wallendroff. I'll try to be fairly brief with this to keep on time. So just some highlights. I won't cover everything that happened this morning in the board meeting, since that's you're already up to speed on that. The couple of the highlights that we're having in our area is, of course, the 1480 study for House Bill 1480. We received the interim report. We're going through providing feedback at this point in time. The final report is due to us on November 1st, and then we have to bring that report to the governor's, or not the governor, but the legislature on December 1st. And this, as a reminder, is the study for the allowances that were temporarily extended by statute for the curbside and the delivery services, et cetera. And so we're trying to work with the vendor on creating a document and report that utilizes similar terms that we're used to. We found that there was some nomenclature confusion going on, and then the executive summary is fairly dense right now with data, so we're hoping to have that massaged a little bit so it's a little bit cleaner to be able to look at it at a glance. The other areas that we're looking at, we're making some progress on some of our medical cannabis efforts. So we're drafting some educational material for licensees, trying to inform folks about the importance of maintaining the standards within the medical endorsements area. We've worked with Department of Health to get their take, so we're on the same page with them and their program. So hopefully we're going to be able to put that out in the near future. We also have a student at a university that is working on their master's program that was looking for some topics to do some research. And so we're partnering with her, and we're still in the beginning phases of that, but she's planning on doing some research around the medical cannabis area and surveying not only patients, but retail stores about different practices. And so we can hopefully have a better understanding about some of the trends that are being shared with us anecdotally as well. And so we're hopeful of that particular project as well. And again, I'll have more information as that starts to develop. We're really at the beginning stages of that. We also have, as you heard from Jim Weatherly earlier, mentioned the tribal relations position. We've got the job description lined out. We're hoping to get that position announced in the near future. One of the things that we're looking at doing is opening that position up to be more along the lines of a telecommuting type of position, so that we can gain a wider breadth of applicants, especially hopefully we'll have some tribal member interest. And, we recognize that if somebody's in Spokane or somebody's, on the peninsula that they may not want to move to Olympia. And if we want to get good qualified candidates that are willing to work for us, but they may not necessarily be in a position to relocate, then they have that opportunity as well. So we're hopeful of that, and we'll be seeing that coming out in the near future. With that, I've been reaching out to some of the tribes and having conversations about the program with them and seeing what they would like to see out of a program, and how the government-to-government relation would work best for them, and some of those, not only the program and approach, but some of the topics they'd be interested in discussing. And so we're underway with some of those strategies as well. We also had our first World Cafe model for the plant canopy conversation with industry members. We were pleasantly surprised that we had over 90 people on the call. So that was a really good turnout, but it did create some technical issues for our first one. So I think overall it went really well. We got good feedback, but we also have some lessons learned that we're going to utilize on developing the next rounds as we move forward. So we've got strategies in place to streamline that a little bit and have some process improvements in there. So I will stop with there. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer anything specific that you have on your mind.
Any questions for Justin? Yes, Justin, not Dustin. Sorry. I think I said it right.
Dustin.
We'll start with you next time, Justin. So
Oh, no worries. It'll still be quick.
Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, and that brings us to director's comments from Rick.
So I know we are way over, but a few comments. Jim Weatherly, like all of you had shared, he's just doing a great job with our program. And also wanted to share that on November 8th, I've reached out to Merritt Long to come and spend an hour with us, a management team, taking questions, just talking about the book that he wrote, My View from the Back of the Bus. I don't see why I couldn't invite the board members and staff to join us for that if they'd like, and also provide the book if I haven't yet. I thought I had.
I have it.
Oh, okay.
You can't invite more than one of us
Oh, okay.
unless you want to broadcast.
I mean, it's about a book, but I was thinking maybe that'd be different than other decisions.
Check,
But anyway, just wanted to share that. Number two, that's a really good point, Jim, and you've raised it before about helping getting bullet points or talking points on, not just the legislative proposals, but the work that we're doing. And so I made note of that. I want to make sure, I know Brian can help. Sometimes the one pagers that Chris puts together are pretty technical in nature, maybe for a different audience, but I think we should be able to provide all of us, including the board members, just a one pager that kind of simply walks through the proposals. So thank you for sharing that. We'll work on doing that. Yeah, I thought the World Cafe, the fact that we had 90 people on it, that was a really good discussion. Thanks to Kathy and Justin for putting that together. There was an ADAI symposium several weeks ago that several of the staff, and I know Jim Vollendroff was there and a part of that discussion. It was on high THC cannabis. And ADAI is Alcohol and Drug Abuse Institute. And the symposium was at the University of Washington. And we did a debrief last week that maybe, Jim, you could share what you gained from that. And we debriefed more about, is there anything that we learned there that we should consider with respect to policy, rules, or legislation? So I think I'll kick it to you, Jim.
Yeah, thank you, Rick. It was real. I thought it was really good. We had good representation. As Rick indicated, he was there, I was there, Tony was there, Justin and Kathy both participated remotely. And then, of course, we had Jillian Schauer, who participated in our debrief of that. I thought, again, it was very good. And, just some highlights is, we can expect innovation, I think was one of the key takeaways. We can expect that the things that we are facing relating to Delta 8 and high concentration THC THC and innovation are going to be nothing but continue. And, you know, although the conference was about high THC concentration products, one of the first presenters that some of you are probably familiar with, Jonathan Calkins, highlighted that while high concentration THC products are something for us to be thinking about and concerned about, there are probably 4 or 5 other things that he finds even more compelling for us to be thinking about. So yes, it makes the list of the top 10, but it's not number 1 on the list. So that gave us a lot to think about. I would suggest, you know, I've been thinking a lot about the potential for having a couple of lunch and learn or brown bag sessions or whatever, and listen to some of the sessions. They were all recorded. I sent Dustin before the meeting a link to all of the sessions, and Dustin, I'll have you send that out after this meeting's over so everybody has access to all of the trainings. But there were sessions, I think the guy from University of Waterloo, David Hammond, was mentioned earlier, and he was there talking about the trends to consumers, adverse outcomes, etc. So there were lots of opportunities, and it also lends itself to our conversation earlier about community involvement and conversations with community. And one of the things that we talked about when we debriefed is how do we engage more with our licensees and producers, processors, getting them to the table and identifying what some of our common goals are and where we need to work together. So I think there's just lots of opportunities for us to bring this together. And I'd be happy to be a part of listen and learn sessions if people are interested in having some sessions with some of the topics that were presented.
Thanks, Jim. As soon as we get out of this meeting, I'm going to make an offer for the candidate that we had for the legislative director. So I want to thank the staff that would help with the first round of interviews. Chair Postman, thank you for joining me on the final interviews. We had 2 great candidates, and I'll share more after today, but really excited to have this person join us. And I think that's all I've got, David, unless there's any questions.
Great. Just last call for any questions or comments from the board. You know?
Real quick, and David, I think you were on me today. You did less talking, I'm doing more.
Well, that's
But
how
real
it
quick,
goes, Ollie. We're back and forth.
I know, but I found what the announcement on the third-party vendor, but what it took for me to get to it on the social equity page, I can see where it would have been overlooked if people were on go on that page. I think that was something that probably should have been on the front page. I had to click on what LCB doing now to get to it. So just putting that out there.
Yeah, you know, and what's interesting is it did get out there because what we heard today was somebody told me they saw, you know, but so sometimes it's hard to get it to the right people who are going to appear, but you know, look,
and the reason I'm bringing it up, David, is because they made the comment at the board meeting. I got emails and text messages from other folks that didn't know that had been done from hearing that being discussed at the board meeting.
Yeah, I think, going forward, and I know that Becky and Brian are thinking the same, is that we can't over communicate about this program. And frankly, I think we're going to want to do things we haven't had a chance to do before. We're really going to sell it. So, I was glad to hear the feedback because we can think about that. And I think we're open to whatever it takes to just get that. So, whether it's a special place on the homepage or whatever it is, or a weekly update at board caucus for whatever is coming or something, we can do whatever we want to just keep the spotlight on that. So let's do that. Okay, great. Thanks everybody for hanging in. Appreciate it. Sorry we went over, and we will see y'all next week, and we will adjourn the executive management team meeting. Thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.